At this point, my husband's account is totally empty. Help yourself and be thankful for what little is left. Though they didn't express it directly, my brother and mom had the same sentiments. My brother was right about everything, and when Sale fell into our trap, the whole family erupted in laughter. I'm Stephanie. My brother Edward died last year. His last moments were spent calmly in his slumber, one early morning after 6 months in the hospital. He was just 35. My family has 3 of us, my younger brother Henry, me, and Edward. We are separated by 2 years. Henry and I are still unmarried, whereas Edward is married. I didn't like Lisa when Edward introduced her to me. Since I only had brothers, I was initially thrilled about the prospect of having a girl, but I had a negative first impression of her. Nice to meet you, Lisa remarked, grinning and looking adorable as she sat down next to Edward in the living room where the entire family had gathered. She was employed in the clothing sector and 5 years Edward's senior. It seems that their common friends introduced them. To be honest, I thought Edward's captivated expression was a little excessive, but because it was his first girlfriend, I thought it made sense. Lisa inquired, "Is this house a rental?" While I was laughing at Edward, I believed I had misheard her. Was that all she asked? Was this a rental house? She asked that question, but why? Mom chuckled and said, "Our late dad built this house," as I was thinking about it. Not rented, but owned. Why are you asking? I had not misheard then. An unexplainable sensation of unease started to permeate through me. That's excellent. I was aware of your father's passing, but you're a single mother, correct? I wanted to know whether you were in need. I became enraged. While it's true that single mothers sometimes create the impression of having financial difficulties, Mom's hard work plus the sizable bequest Dad left behind prevented our family from experiencing financial hardship. Dad died of disease while he was in his 40s. Henry was only in 6th grade, I was in 8th, and Edward was in 10th. Dad must have felt a great deal of pain leaving Mom and his school-age kids behind, but he left us enough money for this house and our education. I felt as though his motives were being compromised, and my concern for her increased immediately. Stay calm about such things. Mom leads a department at her work, and Dad left us a wealth via insurance. We are all financially secure because we are all working siblings. Edward, are you not able to realize that she is illogical? Is it not bothering you? It's been said that love is blind, but this is not it. But you know, once we're married, I become part of your family. All right. I'm in serious trouble if my husband's family is impoverished. She responded, I don't want that. Whoa, marriage is already on her mind? Given that she's been returned home and all, I suppose it makes sense, but I may need to reconsider my connection with Edward. I informed Mom and Henry that I couldn't bear her after Edward promised to walk her home and they departed. Her as the wife of Edward? Not at all. What's up with that woman? Stated Henry. Weird, right? It's a bit much to worry about money already. It's a little unsettling, Mom continued. Well, it may not be the most sane thing to say, but finances do play a significant role in marriage, don't they? If she's talking about her worries honestly, rather than keeping them to herself, that's kind of understanding. Old-fashioned Mom, always so sensible. She thinks it's charming, even after such a nasty insult. It makes sense why she succeeds as a sales director. In spite of that initial impression, I decided to just keep my distance and didn't object too much to Edward being married to her. They tied the knot a year after Edward brought Lisa home. I didn't see her again until Christmas and summer holidays. Lisa and I didn't communicate much personally, and I was able to go about my days without experiencing any special difficulty. Henry reached out to me one day for guidance. Henry hadn't moved out yet, but he had gotten a job that required him to commute from home, and I had moved out when I started working and was living alone. Henry told me that he had received a message from Lisa. "How long are you going to live off of your parents?" she had asked. "You ought to move out since you're an adult and live by yourself." Though I knew it was self-serving, I was relieved when Henry announced he would be working from home. Mom had assured us that there was nothing to worry about. But why would Lisa tell Henry that kind of thing? Henry staying at home shouldn't be a problem because she and Edward had their own house. "Don't worry about it," I said to him. "You stayed. Therefore I was free to move out. I'm appreciative of it." Henry then revealed a suspicion. "Lisa has been coming over to our place a lot lately. She chats with Mom most of the time. She arrives by herself, eats the supper that Mom prepared, packs Edward's share into a container, and departs." "Is it really true?" "I heard her chatting to Mom in the living room the other day after I got out of the shower." "If I move out, it will be lonely for you to live here by yourself," she said. "What if we live here?" Perhaps she's after this house. I was in disbelief at what was occurring. The last time I talked to Mom on the phone, she made no mention of Lisa. Perhaps she wanted to spare me the trouble. I have a nasty feeling about this. I hung up and gave Edward a call right away. I wanted to talk to him about something, so I asked him to meet. Edward seemed to have some issues of his own, and agreed to meet immediately when I stated that I wanted to chat about Lisa. I went to the pub Edward had suggested after work. He was sipping on a drink already. It appeared like Edward, who I hadn't seen since Christmas, had shed some pounds. Our previous meeting was about 6 months ago. "Edward, are things okay with Lisa?" I questioned him directly as I sat down and placed my beer order. "Do you two communicate? She has reportedly been home quite a bit. Are you aware of that?" With a sardonic smirk, Edward continued, "You know too, Stephanie. I know she's gone to Mom a lot, but she doesn't talk about these trips when she's here. How do you know? There are dishes from Mom's cooking on the dinner table. Unless she's taking lessons or carrying food from Mom's, you can't get that flavor, right?" I answered. "That makes sense," Edward remarked, acknowledging Mom's cooking's flavor. "Why don't you discuss it with Lisa? If you went to your spouse's relatives, you would normally discuss it, right?" I asked. "She's never mentioned it to me," he said, lost in thoughts. "Lisa had offered to move in with Mom. Do you know that?" Edward looked thoughtful and remarked, "I didn't know that." But then he abruptly stated to me, "She spends money like water." "Spends money like water?" I repeated. Based on her looks, Lisa obviously spends a lot of money on clothing. She barely comes to see me twice a year, but when she does, her clothing, bags, shoes, and accessories are always high-end brands. I didn't believe they could afford such luxury because, as far as I know, Edward is an average salaryman and Lisa is a housewife. Given that they are childless, I figured they were saving money somewhere else. Edward admitted, "I'm thinking about divorcing her. She obtained $50,000 in loans from different credit bureaus and consumer finance organizations using my name without notifying me. When collection letters began showing up at the house, that's when I discovered it. But that's not all. She's also been taking money out of our savings. Our balance is nil. It's absurd." With sorrowful eyes, Edward chuckled. But I didn't think it was amusing at all. Lisa is in fact irrational and unreliable. My first assessment was accurate. Perhaps I ought to have objected to their marriage with greater vigor, but I was speechless when I saw Edward in such anguish. Edward says Lisa most likely wanted to move in with Mom in order to save money on rent so she could use it for herself. The whole amount they are presently paying in rent would be saved if they owned the family home. In addition, Lisa would have even more spare cash if she could get Mom to pay for food and utilities. Lisa was apparently incapable of doing any chores. Hold on, isn't she a housewife? Lisa was a parasite on Edward's pay, not managing the house or working. We drank a little something that day and ended the evening. Waving goodbye, Edward promised to get in contact if the divorce proceeded. But when Edward got in touch with me again, It had nothing to do with our divorce. Edward's cancer was in an advanced stage. When he arrived at our family home with his diagnosis, thinner than when I had last seen him, I couldn't believe it. He gave us hospital admittance documents that required the family's approval. We were limited to crying in front of Edward. The terrible illness that had killed Dad was now taking Edward. "Why this soon?" Mom said, pointing to Dad's picture. Edward's physicians gave him 3 months to live after admitting him to the hospital. After his admission, he was receiving hospice care. Lisa had vanished from view. Edward had been in the hospital for about 3 months, and his time with the physicians was almost up, but he was still battling. Every week we would go see him, but for 5 months he was unable to do anything, not even get out of bed. The nurses attested to Lisa's non-occurrence of visits over this period. Nobody else visited Edward but us. The only families permitted to visit the hospital were Lisa's and ours. Despite all this, the divorce never materialized, and it appeared like Edward would die before it was settled. I had at first firmly advised that Edward get a divorce from her, but I changed my mind after hearing his opinions. Edward died 6 months after being admitted to the hospital. We returned his body to our family's house. After all this time, Edward must have been relieved to get home. Lisa appeared as we were talking with the funeral director about the preparations, presumably because Mom had gotten in touch with her. "Get out!" I was about to yell, but Edward and Lisa were still legally wed. I couldn't dispute with her answer that she had the right to bid him farewell. The funeral director then arranged for us and Edward to go to the funeral home. There, we informed Edward's friends, co-workers, and acquaintances about the wake and funeral. We were too busy getting ready for the funeral to have time for mourning, but it took our minds off Edward's loss. Despite the unbearable grief of losing her kid and her beloved husband to the same cancer, Mom managed to remain calm and organized all the way through. Henry and I would frequently cry uncontrollably out of sheer anguish, which worried everyone around us. Lisa reappeared after the burial. She'd skipped the wake and the burial, even though she insisted she had a right to see him off. In fact, we were relieved that she was not here. Her flamboyant, branded clothing was unfit for a place of grief. How on earth was she here? Lisa came up to us and asked if we had done any fundraising or received any funding, as well as how much money was raised. I was immediately incensed by her question since she had come to steal the funds that were being raised for Edward's burial. "Are you coming to get gifts? Now go and don't ever show up here again," I shouted. "What are you talking about?" Lisa shot back. "I, his wife, am the rightful owner of the money that was raised for his funeral. Quickly turn them over." "You cannot get money. Leave now." With tangible anger, Henry and I yelled. "You didn't pay Edward a visit in the hospital at all. Which type of spouse are you?" Lisa grinned and said, "But we're not divorced, so I'm obviously his wife." Then Mom gently told Lisa, there were no cash contributions or grants. All of the money was used to cover the funeral costs. In actuality, we're short by around $500,000. Will you be covering it as his wife? You have to pay for that. I understand that Dad has an inheritance. Besides, his finances were not very strong. There was barely $2,000 in his bank account, Lisa answered. Then she took Edward's bank card out of her branded purse. Among the things we should have taken back from the hospice to prepare for the funeral was that card. Was it taken by her without authorization? I went to the bank and took out all of the cash, not coins, but bills from the ATM. She slammed Edward's bank card and a paper statement onto the table and screamed, "Here, take the change." Upon closer examination, I saw that just a little amount of money remained after $2,000 had been taken out. Sadness and frustration filled tears spilled out. "Leave, simply leave." That money belonged to my son, Mom subsequently told Lisa. "It was improper of you to withdraw it without authorization." "What's wrong with you? I'm his wife," Lisa protested. I am entitled to receive his estate. Well, since I'm his mother, I'm also entitled to inherit. There was just $2,000 in the account. That's his whole estate, which is yours to own. We want no more contact with you in exchange. Deal? I stated. Then I pushed Lisa out the door, grabbed her arm, and dragged her to it. Henry and I just stared at one another for a long time before we started laughing. In fact, we purposefully placed the banking card among Edward's possessions because we knew Lisa may try to take it. All of this was a part of Edward's scheme. Once in the hospital, Edward took advantage of the opportunity to quietly organize his affairs. He gave me and Henry his portion of Dad's money and moved the insurance beneficiary to Mom. These were precautions to make sure Lisa didn't get anything. When Edward realized he didn't have much time left, he came up with a scheme to force Lisa to pay off the debts she had accrued instead of divorcing her. Lisa was a housewife with little credit, so she was unable to get loans on her own. Instead, she had been using Edward's identity. Edward had intended to file a lawsuit to give Lisa the debts, but since his sickness was revealed, the court case would take too long. He purposefully decided not to file for divorce, intending to leave Lisa with the debts, knowing that his life would probably end before the court's ruling. Receiving assets is only one aspect of inheritance. Obligations are also included. Edward owed $5,000, all of which Lisa had caused. He meant to leave that debt to her. Edward created a banking card with just $22,000 for this reason, giving up everything else. The $50,000 debt and the $2,000 in the account made up his estate. Lisa would definitely attempt to get her hands on the bank card after he died. He knew she would take out the money and spend it fast, so he had left it handy. Since Lisa doesn't know much about the law, the account was just bait, and she would probably leave things alone. In the meanwhile, we would finish the renunciation of inheritance, guaranteeing Lisa would get the entirety of Edward's fortune. Edward had given us instructions on this plan several times, and he would see to it that it was carried out. After we finished the renunciation of inheritance, Edward's will was carried out in its entirety. All of Edward's estate legally belonged to Lisa in a span of 3 months. Nothing happened for 6 months, and pictures of Edward and Dad were still on display at the house. The doorbell rang one day while I was praying in front of the photographs of Edward and Dad at home. Lisa was there on the door. "Is it possible for us to speak?" she said. "I have something to say." She kept pounding loudly on the door even after I ignored her and switched off the doorbell. "Please open. I'd like to speak," she said. "Open the door now." The thudding became more intense as the hammering increased in volume. As Mom opened the door, Lisa pushed her way in. "Hey, you're rich, right? Give Edward his portion of your possessions and inheritance," Lisa yelled. It seems that she had come to terms with the fact that her inheritance had a negative balance. A negative inheritance is unheard of. You depleted Edward's savings. Only $2,000 was left, my mother said coldly. "Lies," she cried out. "Give me this house, then. Edward should get Dad's estate because he was the oldest son. I should inherit this house because I am his wife. My name is on this house. It's something my husband gave me. You have no right to it because the kids were still in school at the time," my mother said. "Why was the oldest son left with nothing? You folks are insane. Give me whatever Edward was meant to inherit, please." "I've stated it a number of times. Nothing remains. Please go right away." At this point, my mom was begging her to leave just to get rid of shouting. "No, I own this house. I refuse to depart," she urged. Lisa then began tossing objects into the foyer. Mom and I dashed outdoors, drawing the attention of a neighbor who must have heard the ruckus. He was urged to contact the police. Before long, a patrol car with sirens screaming pulled up. 2 stout police officers got out. We described the situation to the authorities, and they soon came out with a screaming and yelling Lisa. When she spotted us, her outburst got stronger, but the cops shoved her into the patrol car and took her away. We later found out that Lisa had signed a contract promising not to talk to us after receiving a harsh scolding at the police station. Nearly a year has gone since Edward's death. I like to imagine that just like Dad always wanted, he and Edward are now sipping drinks together in peace. I can't help but smile when I look up at the brilliant sky and think about my dad and Edward. In the middle of these contemplations, I'm facing a new sort of difficulty. I'm Julia, and I'm 25 years old. 6 months ago, my 25-year-old spouse Leo and I got married. While our new house is being built, we are temporarily residing with my in-laws. Since we first started dating, our relationship has been good, and my in-laws are fair and friendly. After our marriage, there was no sudden shift in their perspective. Instead, we all got along well. But there's a problem with my sister-in-law, Veronica. Since our initial meeting, Veronica, who is a year younger than Leo, has not liked me. She used to criticize my looks and sense of style quite a bit. Even though Veronica and her partner are now living together, things aren't working out, and she regularly goes back home. When Veronica is here, she manages me with different tasks and treats me nearly like a servant. My in-laws and hubby have chastised her, but Veronica hasn't behaved any differently. One day, she announced her presence from the entryway, and we heard it while I was enjoying a coffee break. Veronica insisted on something sweet when I got up to make her coffee. I gave her some cookies, but she turned them down, citing poor quality. She even admitted that she was craving jasmine tea, but she reluctantly took the cookies in their place. Even though I was annoyed, I decided to keep my thoughts to myself and refrained from arguing. My mother-in-law, Ava, saw this and started berating Veronica. "What are you saying to Julia, seriously? How is she expected to understand your emotions? Julia is not your servant. She is Leo's wife. You return here nearly daily. Have you discussed things with Max?" Veronica covered her ears and acted like a whiny kid, obviously not wanting to listen. When they first started dating, Veronica's boyfriend Max was truly friendly and pleasant. Early on, they appeared to be on the verge of marriage since they were so in love that it was almost difficult to witness. But after a few months of cohabitation, significant issues surfaced. Veronica was careless with money, disregarded housework, and her affair was discovered. After a while, Max proposed ending things. Max wanted Veronica out of there as quickly as possible because the place was rented in his name. Veronica adamantly refused to go and shunned conversations about it in spite of this. Though I was surprised by Veronica's actions, I decided not to say anything because I didn't think she would take counsel. "Take into account Max's feelings, not just your own," Ava said to Veronica. "You should first offer an apology if you have done anything incorrect." Ava spoke softly, like she was trying to reprimand a kid, but Veronica didn't seem to take any of it. Ava was exhausted by the time Veronica departed. "I'll take care of things from here," I informed her. "Kindly take a moment to relax." "Thank you, Julia," was Ava's tired grin in response. "I believe I will take a little break." It was obvious that Ava was tired from dealing with Veronica, and I wanted to support her. We were enjoying a leisurely breakfast the following day, a holiday, when the doorbell rang. When I went to check, Max was there at the door. "Max has arrived," I declared. Taking a serious look, my father-in-law remarked, "Let him in." Max was shown into the living room as I opened the door. My in-laws gave him a heartfelt bow and an apology. "A long time has passed. For everything our daughter has caused you to endure, we sincerely apologize. We must be to blame for how we brought her up. Even as an adult, she is incapable of telling good from bad." It broke my heart to see my in-laws lower their heads in apologies for Veronica's actions. My spouse also had a worried expression on his face. With a concerned expression, Max addressed everyone. "Hi, everyone. It has been a long while. Kindly lift your heads. I came here today to talk to you about something important, therefore it's not your fault. We'll do everything we can to help, he said. Do not hesitate to ask questions. Ava gave a happy response. Our goal is to assist. Tell us what you need, please. Then Max said, I'm grateful. I apologize, but I need your assistance to persuade Veronica to move out of the flat as soon as possible. I sincerely hate that this has happened, and I trusted her enough to let us live together. My in-laws, seeing his honest apology, gave him a pitying look. Max seemed exhausted, maybe from not getting enough, and he was looking drained. Leo, my husband, saw this and gave a firm nod, saying, You don't even need to ask. We'll see to it that Veronica knows she's been a burden. Yes, Max, we're very sorry, Ava said. Max forced a feeble smile, appearing somewhat reassured by their reply. Once Max departed, my in-laws talked about what to do with Veronica. They made the decision to give her a call and attempt to get her to go. We said we would be upstairs if necessary, my husband and I. When Veronica finally came, about half an hour later, we could hear more and more voices coming from the living room. Every now and again, we would hear something shattering, Ava screaming, and Veronica yelling angrily. My spouse and I exchanged anxious glances, uncertain about when to step in. Then Ava's voice could be heard pleading, Leo, Julia, would you please come down here? We hurried downstairs to see an irate Veronica, a stern-looking Leo, and an obviously tired Ava. The sideboard's glass doors were broken, and the TV remote and Veronica's purse were strewn all over the floor. Despite the turmoil that astounded me, my husband asked Ava calmly, Mom, are you okay? Weary but beaming, Ava said, Yes, I apologize for worrying you. Leo and Julia, we want you to know that Veronica is not welcome in our home until she truly changes and reflects on her actions. Thomas continued, Please don't allow her in if she attempts to enter while we're away. My spouse gave me a nod of approval. We've decided not to tolerate Veronica's behavior any longer, Ava went on. Despite having a fantastic guy, she decides to be egotistical and cheat. It's not appropriate. She will have to work and repay the money she has lost. Julia, please lend a hand here. I nodded, saying, Understood. Veronica sighed and stared at me, evidently annoyed, saying, I'm done with this place. I will never return. Don't come sobbing to me later. You'll regret disregarding your own daughter. After saying her last words, she rushed out of the living room. I ran after her to give her luggage back, since I saw she had left it behind. Mom and Dad said what they said, but if you try to stop me from entering this house just because you're the wife, you'll regret it. Veronica snatched it from me angrily. After a moment of hesitation, I moved away, causing Ava to come closer to me with worry. Hey, you didn't say anything rude to Julia, did you? Ava inquired. With a nonchalant reply, Veronica said, I didn't say anything. She then shut the door and walked out. Leo and I were back in the living room talking about Veronica. Were you able to persuade her? Now what is she going to do? Inquired my spouse. Leo said, appearing exhausted, She has decided to vacate Max's place for the time being. She will probably start paying back the money she has spent by renting a residence of her own. After 3 months, our lives that Veronica had upended were starting to return to normal. After their conversations, Max phoned to thank us and let us know that Veronica had moved out. Even yet, we were in the dark about Veronica's whereabouts and activities, as we had not received any word from her. Although I was a little worried about her, I was also largely relieved. Then one day, out of the blue, Veronica came back. Ava was shopping with a friend, while Thomas and my husband were at work. I looked at the monitor and saw Veronica standing there as the doorbell rang. She let herself in and opened the door before I could say anything. The location appears entirely different now that I'm not there. Has the majority of the furnishings been disposed of or something? I see you're here. How could you have ignored my doorbell ringing? My brother and Dad. Are they at work? Mom, where are you? She began shouting. Veronica burst in with a ton of stuff, including a duffel bag and a huge suitcase. I replied that Ava had gone shopping with a friend, feeling terrible. Veronica added, "Please wash these by tomorrow," as she nonchalantly opened her duffel bag and dropped a mountain of laundry at my feet. "If you don't get this done soon, I'll run out of clothes." What? I was stunned as I looked at her, and Veronica, who was obviously furious, went on her rant. "What are you saying? What? You talk back? How dare you? You're only a spouse. I am this house's daughter." I attempted to stop her, but she would not stop yelling. "Oh, and I'm dehydrated. I'll be clear about what I want since leaving things up to you never ends well. I'm craving a cafe au lait and a scone loaded with chocolate chips right now. Go get some if we don't already have some at home. I'll give it 5 minutes or so. Did you tell the in-laws that you'd be coming back today?" I felt the need to explain, as if the recent encounter hadn't occurred. With a casual response, Veronica said, "No, I didn't. They could have changed the locks if I had alerted them ahead of time. However, I know my brother, Mom, and Dad will be happy to see me again. I mean, I am this house's cherished daughter after all." Startled by her too positive outlook, I firmly said, "Then please go. Since they haven't forgiven you, I can't defy their desires." Veronica yelled back, irritated, "Why should I listen to you? You're only a spouse. I'm this house's priceless daughter. Isn't a wife like a housekeeper? All you have to do is obey me in silence. Now go to work." I calmly turned to face the enraged Veronica and declared, "I don't live in this house." Veronica made an odd squeak in return, expressing her complete astonishment. Veronica was stunned as she stood there, as Ava's happy voice emerged from the doorway. "Hello to all of you." My spouse and Leo arrived home after Ava, and the house was instantly bustling. My spouse and the in-laws seemed astonished to see Veronica. There was a little pause before Leo spoke out firmly. "Why are you here, Veronica?" Leo remarked sharply. "We warned you that you're not welcome until you've really thought about and regretted your acts." His harshness surprised Veronica, but she soon reverted to her customary behavior. "I've returned because I've thought back on what I did. I'm the daughter of this home, so please pardon me," she begged. Leo's face did not waver despite her entreaties. My father-in-law and Ava agreed with him and refrained from defending her. With a sly smile, Veronica turned to face me, knowing she was in a bad position. "Julia just mentioned that she doesn't reside here, by the way. What action did this woman take to lose her house? It has to be something very bad." My spouse was perplexed by Veronica's remarks and said, "Huh? We haven't taken any action." Confused, Veronica inquired, "What do you mean? My sibling was also expelled. I have no idea what's going on." "We weren't expelled," I said coolly. "We chose to relocate since Leo received a work transfer and our new house was ready. That was the plan all along, but the official orders just came through recently," I said. "The new location is a pleasant town with fresh air and delectable cuisine, even if it is in the country. Not only are we moving, but Dad and Mom are also moving." With obvious excitement, the in-laws said, "That's correct. From now on, we are going to enjoy a relaxed lifestyle in Hawaii. We've been planning this relocation for years, and happily, we were able to find a buyer for this property right away." Veronica started to act irritated and fussy. "Are you really going to sell the house? Hold on. Is that the reason why there isn't much furniture left? I had no prior knowledge of this. I intended to move here when I returned. How am I meant to proceed?" "Stop being so selfish," Ava reprimanded her. "As an adult, accept accountability for your own deeds." Veronica started crying and kept looking at us. "We heard from Max about your affair with a married man," furious Leo stated. "In addition to having to reimburse Max, you're in hot water because his wife is chasing money from you. You are solely responsible for it." Veronica attempted angrily to hurl some of the remaining furniture at my husband and myself after realizing that Leo would not pardon her. "I detest every single one of you. Damn it," she said. Veronica nearly acted out again, but Thomas and my husband were able to stop her. Ava made the police call without thinking twice. Veronica sobbed and acted out till the police showed up. Veronica was then observed sleeping in parks and internet cafes and working throughout the day to make ends meet as she had nowhere else to go. She appeared considerably older and more unkempt than the polished, contemporary young woman she had formerly been. My spouse and I are content in our new house and had a smooth transition. Now that they're in Hawaii, the in-laws appear to be leading a cozy and relaxed existence. We keep in good contact with them through our frequent video conversations, just as we did when we shared a residence. The entire family was on a video conference with the in-laws today because it was a holiday. The in-laws played with our infant on the television, appearing tanned and grinning. Our baby, still very small, looked on indifferently. Our youngster suddenly grinned brilliantly, and our in-laws joyfully applauded. I considered these uncomplicated daily experiences to be immensely valuable.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, "I'm moving to the sales department soon." If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. "Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one?" As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.